I read the New York Times, or at least I get it emailed to me every day, and I try to work through some of the headlines. And in the last several months, they've published a bunch of articles about a play called Shen Yun. I hope I'm pronouncing that okay. And basically trashing it. And I thought we would talk with the executive director of the Falun Dafa Information Center about why the New York Times has been on the warpath and why he got involved in this issue. Please welcome to the program Levi Browdy. Levi, how are you?
Very well. Thank you very much for having me there.
Levi, before we get into what the Falun Dafa Information Center is, tell me about your background. How is it that you got involved in this issue?
So I'm a software entrepreneur, and my best friend 26 years ago, 27 years ago, in a little startup we had in New York, is Chinese, and he started practicing Falun Gong, which is this Buddhist-based spiritual practice. And one day he came into the office and said, "My mom's gone." And, you know, what do you mean? And that was my sort of entry into this whole quarter-century persecution that had just started at that time to completely eliminate the spiritual practice in China. And so I got very involved from that perspective, from that day forward, actually, on the human rights side.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've done a lot of work with Epoch Time to carry my column. I still do stuff with them. That's when I first learned about Falun Gong. Tell me what it is and why in the world is the Chinese government so threatened by it?
Sure. So it's a traditional, what they call Qi Gong, or Chinese yoga spiritual practice. It involves typical Buddhist-based meditation, slow motion exercise, and studying Buddhist principles that are really centered on, in Chinese, Zhenchanren, or truthfulness, compassion, or resilience, are really the principles. So study those principles, you try to be more like that in your daily life, and you meditate. That's pretty much it.
It sounds benign, Levi. It sounds benign. So what's the problem?
Quite benign. And even, you know, if you go back into the 1990s in China, it was everywhere. I mean, it's every park, every village, every town. The Chinese government was praising it. So it was very, very popular back then. It was kind of their version of church on Sunday, baseball, and apple pie all rolled into one. I mean, it was heartland Chinese spirituality. But what happened is it got too popular. 100 million people. That's way more people than there in the Communist Party. And so in '99, the head of the CCP at that time, Jiang Zemin, who was really trying to build up a cult of personality around himself while Falun Gong's getting all this attention, he was the one who gave the order to crush it. And from that day on, in July '99, you know, if you're Falun Gong in China, you're basically a Jew in 1938 Germany. Fired from your job, kicked out of school, lose your housing, rampant detention, rampant torture, rampant death from torture. And that's what's been going on for the last 25 years because it was too popular. And because also the spirituality represented, I think, a challenge to the Marxism that the regime had tried to be imposing on the people of China.
Well, that was my question. So it's not the tolerance and openness that threatens them. It's that somehow it's a repudiation of the primacy of the communist state?
Bingo. I mean, if you look at the history of the Communist Party in China, every 10 years they have this campaign, you know, get rid of the landlords, get rid of the academics, get rid of the intellectuals, get rid of every piece of society that could challenge Marxism. And in particular, Cultural Revolution was the worst one because that was really the push to get rid of Chinese culture. It was a very deep, spiritual, profound culture. They need to get rid of that so they could push Marxism on people, and they succeeded on that by and large until Falun Gong comes around. And it really represented, I would say, a spiritual renaissance in China in the 90s. And so that was also a key factor in the leader's decision to crush it.
Tell me about Falun Dafa Information Center.
So this was, you know, back in the fall of 1999. We're a couple months in. The Chinese regime is crushing Falun Gong. No one knows what it is. They don't know, is it a town? Is it a person? And a couple of volunteers got together in an apartment in the Upper West Side of Manhattan and said, we need a human rights organization to get these stories out of China, do the analysis, explain what's happening to the world. And so that's how we really formed this. And so over the last 25 years, largely based on volunteers, that's what we've been doing.
Okay, let's talk about the play, Shen Yun. I've seen it twice. It is beautiful. I'm not a big musical guy, big dance guy, but it is absolutely breathtakingly beautiful and intricate. For whatever reason, the Communist Chinese Party feels threatened by this play. Tell me why.
What it's doing is really two things. It is bringing back the original, authentic Chinese culture, which again is very spiritual. Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, these things, and putting it on stage to the world and showing you this is how wonderful and profound China was before communism. Of course, the implication is this is how wonderful China could be without communism, again. So that's one very threatening message that the Chinese regime doesn't want people to hear. But also in telling the story of China, going back 5,000 years, it also tells very clearly and unabashedly the story of modern China, which includes the tyranny of the CCP, the resilience of Falun Gong practitioners and other people standing up to the CCP. That's also a story that the Chinese regime doesn't want people to hear. And so for those two reasons, they see this show almost as an existential threat because it challenged the very narrative of them being the true leaders of the Chinese people, its nation, and its culture.
Now, this show is not just in one location. I go around the country and I see troops in Chicago, troops in New York. How many, is it called Shen Yun, troops are there, and what does the title mean, the name mean?
So there are 8 companies now. It started just one company. There's now 8 companies that travel the world every year, tour. They go to 5 continents, over 200 cities, 1 million people. So Shen Yun, the direct translation, Shen would be sort of divine, and Yun is like the inner bearing or expression of a dancer. So really into English, it's sort of like the beauty of divine beings dancing. That's what really the name Shen Yun, that's what it means.
Okay, Levi, I can understand why the Chinese Communist Party would be threatened by Shen Yun. What I don't understand is why the New York Times would be complicit in their attacks. It seems to me they're buying the line of the Chinese Communist Party and going after something that I would think would be inconsistent with American interest.
I think your conclusion is absolutely right. I think there's 2 things to note there. First of all, the New York Times has a Falun Gong problem. Going back to when the persecution first started, as bad as the media has been in general about covering the persecution, in the beginning, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, they did quality work. Even CNN did quality work. And while they were doing that, the publisher of the New York Times was in Beijing meeting with the architect of the persecution to try and broker business deals. And so from that moment on, they've been repeating CCP propaganda about Falun Gong. They've been silent on the persecution. They even, according to one of their reporters, intentionally killed a story about forced organ harvesting, that atrocity. So the history of the New York Times with Falun Gong is very, very bad, and it's very, very troubling. Fast forward today, they are spending, it seems, more time and resources trying to destroy Shen Yun and go after the Falun Gong diaspora more than they have covered Falun Gong in the last 25 years. And this is the important thing to note here. This is happening right at a time when we are now getting a lot of information about a new campaign starting last year to try and eliminate Falun Gong globally, where they specifically said they want to weaponize Western media, they want to utilize lawfare in U.S. courts, they want to go after U.S. government agencies. All the stuff they said they're going to do, they're doing.
We're going to have to leave it there. Levi, has this come to the attention of Elon Musk?
Now, that's a good question. Yeah. I certainly hope so, but I haven't heard it.
Levi, thank you very much for coming on. God bless. Thanks for watching these clips from The Larry Elder Show. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment. More thought-provoking discussions are just a click away, so stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next one.